This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to the Hindus in Focus podcast with me, Amit Barua, your host for this episode. Pakistan is all set to launch yet another military operation against terrorists on its soil, whom it claims are coming across the border from Afghanistan. Political and army clearance for Operation Azm-i-Istehkam or Resolve for Stability came in the last week of June, but it is still in the works. Several operations have been launched since 2007 by the Pakistani military to rid the country from terror. But the country's own history in backing terrorists in Afghanistan and Kashmir has ensured that there has been no lasting solution to the problem. The country has also seen a parallel wave of fundamentalism and intolerance. So, will Azm-i-Istehkam make a difference? To answer this all-important question, I am joined by Ramanathan Kumar, former Special Secretary in the Research and Analysis Wing, who is an acknowledged expert on Pakistan and Afghanistan. Welcome to the In Focus podcast, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barua. Thank you for having me back on the Hindus podcast. It's both a pleasure and a privilege to be able to talk to you again.
Mr. Kumar, what's your sense? I mean, this Azm-i-Istehkam, as it's been dubbed, will it make any difference to the problem that Pakistan faces? And we've seen of late quite a wave of killings in the border areas of Pakistan that border Afghanistan.
Yes, that is right. Even as we speak, we speak in the shadow of a series of terrorist incidents in the North Waziristan, South Waziristan, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa border areas of Pakistan. Half a dozen security personnel, both from the military and from the police, have been killed as of this morning. So yes, Pakistan is taking quite a beating and a battering, in fact, on the Western Front from what can be termed friends turned foes. But to answer your question in a succinct manner, I am not very optimistic. I mean, I'm almost tempted to say that there have been so many operations, and Azm-i-Istehkam, as you said, is just yet another one of them. And one is almost tempted to say that it is, old wine in a new bottle. So I at least am not very hopeful that it will turn the tide. But I mean, it does show how difficult it is to put the genie back in the box once it's got out. And Pakistan's dilemma is that it has, tried both the carrot and the stick to tame, the beast of jihad, so to speak, or at least jihad that's directed against it. And neither has really worked, neither the carrot nor the stick. So they are caught in a dilemma. And at this point of time, the pendulum seems to be again swinging towards the stick. And we can, of course, talk more about it. But I think Pakistan continues to be in a difficult spot. And it's very difficult to see any light at the end of the tunnel.
Mr. Kumar, who are these groups that are targeting, Pakistani security forces? There are also reports of abductions. So is it that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, is it getting assistance from the Afghan Taliban as Islamabad claims? Or are they an independent group that is operating in the areas that straddle Afghanistan and Pakistan?
So these are, admittedly difficult questions, and the reality, I dare say, is very, very murky. But let us try and get whatever clarity is possible under the circumstances. Well, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is a conglomerate of various jihadi groups. There are many offshoots, many factions, but these are all, but this is a conglomerate of groups that has one fundamental idea, And that idea is to establish Sharia law in Pakistan because they feel that the government in Pakistan, the present structure is not Islamic, and therefore it has to have a truly Islamic form of government, which has to be achieved through the path of armed jihad. That, in substance, is the philosophy of groups like the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. And this is where the similarity with the Afghan Taliban comes in. Just as the Afghan Taliban have established what they call an Islamic emirate in Afghanistan, which is ruled according to the Islamic Sharia. This is exactly the model that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan have in their mind when it comes to Pakistan. Now, and therefore, this, I think, is what makes it, and the TTP, as it's called, have clearly been inspired by the Taliban and greatly emboldened by the Afghan Taliban coming back to power in Afghanistan in 2021. Now, this, I think, is what they are. The TTP are the ideological brethren of the Afghan Taliban. And I think that is what makes it difficult for the Afghan Taliban to take any action against them, even if they are so inclined. Now, and this is the difficulty that Pakistan faces to separate the Afghan Taliban and the TTP. They also go back a long way. They have shared many experiences in the past. When Pakistan joined the global war on terror, there was a crackdown during the regime of General Musharraf, beginning with the regime of General Musharraf in the mid-2000s, after 2001, really. And of course, the Pakistan Army launched as you very rightly said at the beginning, they launched a crackdown against Al-Qaeda in the tribal areas adjoining Pakistan. They protected the Afghan Taliban, but it was that crackdown against Al-Qaeda that led to many of the tribal groups turning against the Pakistani state. And they and the Afghan Taliban these are the tribes that gave shelter to the Afghan Taliban in the tribal areas during those days. So they go back a long way. They have a long history of operational sort of cooperation and collaboration. Add the ideological dimension to it. And so, it is very difficult for the Afghan Taliban to say, betray the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or turn them out of Afghanistan, which is the main difficulty that Pakistan is facing as of now. The Afghan Taliban say that they are not doing any of these things, but these, of course, are denials that cannot be taken at face value.
Mr. Kumar, the military operations against terrorists or militants have never been very popular in Pakistan. They face opposition from a wide arc of political opinion in Pakistan. Do you think that, there are reports that there may be an all-party meeting, a consultation before the operation is launched, which the government is promising will not be, very sort of widespread? So is it your sense that, how would you assess whether this government in Islamabad and Rawalpindi, will it be able to take this criticism which, follows or which precedes such kinds of military operations?
Yes, again, the government is in a difficult spot. One gets the impression that the army is inclined to take more forceful action because there has been, all said and done, there has been a regrouping of the TTP and its various factions and offshoots in the tribal areas. And they are clearly responsible for all the attacks that are taking place against the Pakistani security forces, both in the tribal areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and also in the Pashtun areas of adjoining Balochistan. So, and the previous government of Imran Khan was in favor of a dialogue. And that, according to the critics of the previous government, is what was responsible for creating this new situation. So one gets the sense that it is the army which is in favor of a more forceful approach. But in the past, it is the kinetic operations which have contained the problem to some extent, but they have then resulted in many other problems. The collateral damage has been immense. In fact, it has, over a period of time, led to a swelling of the ranks of the militants in the areas affected by these kinetic operations. So clearly, the government of Shahbaz Sharif is caught in a bind, which is why they want, greater political sort of buy-in from all the political forces. They're even trying to co-opt the opposition, particularly the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, into the operation. There have been some sort of, positive responses from the PTI, although overall they have also been fierce critics of military action. So there is an attempt to forge a political consensus to let the army perhaps once again go in and do a cleaning up act. But it is a very, very difficult situation. It can only perhaps bring some temporary reprieve, but the fundamental problems are not going away.
Mr. Kumar, what is your sense? I mean, there are lots of reports coming out of Pakistan and elsewhere that this military operation, is coming at a time when the government of Pakistan is under a lot of pressure from the Chinese. There have been some attacks on Chinese nationals in Pakistan who have been working on projects there. How would you assess these reports?
Well, clearly there would be pressure. There is pressure from the Chinese. You can make that out from the statements that are issued periodically by the Pakistani political leadership. You can make that out from the statements that came out in the wake of the visit of Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and the army chief to Beijing not so long ago. You can make that out from the statements of visiting Chinese officials and dignitaries to Pakistan. And this has actually been apparent for a long time now. The Chinese, have invested a lot in the CPEC, and clearly they have understood that security is their number one problem. As you very rightly said, Chinese projects have been attacked. Gwadar port, the centerpiece of the CPEC, has come under attack. Chinese personnel have come under attack. In fact, the Pakistanis have set up a special security division of the security forces to specifically to take care of the CPEC projects. But still, the attacks have continued to take place, and the Chinese are almost on the verge of losing patience. They have, I think, at several points of time, read the Riot Act out to Pakistan, that if you can't handle the security, then we will take care of it ourselves, which is, of course, not acceptable to the Pakistanis. So there is clearly Chinese pressure. But you will remember, Chinese pressure has often led to an aggravation of the problem. We all remember what happened in 2007, the Lal Masjid incident, which was a watershed moment in the evolution of terrorism against Pakistan. It was, the pressure from the Chinese that forced finally President Musharraf to take action against the terrorists holed up in the Lal Masjid. And that led to a quantum jump in, Pakistan's domestic terrorism situation. And the TTP problem got gravely aggravated after General Musharraf took action under Chinese pressure. So once again, that pressure is there. And I guess Pakistan has to handle it in whatever manner it deems fit.
Mr. Kumar, I'd now like to ask you about the role of the Americans. I again see from Pakistani press reports that a counterterrorism exercise is going on with Pakistan in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa as we speak. We've seen that relations between Pakistan and the US, at least in the public domain, have been none too good. So, what is your assessment? Given the fact that such an exercise is taking place, it does show that once again relations between the US and Pakistani armies at an operational level they continue. So, is it your sense the Americans too will be happy in case Pakistan does launch an operation of the kind that it is saying it will?
So, well, I think I would say that, today we live in an age of, great power competition or conflict existing side by side with terrorism. Over the past few years, a lot of people have, Western commentators have tended to give greater importance to great power, managing great power conflict. And there's been an argument that terrorism and counterterrorism are a bit of a distraction. But here's the point. You see, this particular area remains extremely important to the Americans and for the entire world, really, as far as their security is concerned. You don't forget that we also now have a new beast. Instead of Al Qaeda, we now have the Islamic State Khorasan province, the ISKP, which is the Afghanistan branch, so to speak, or the AFPAC branch of the Islamic State. And this is an organization with global ambitions. It has carried out attacks very recently in Moscow, in Iran, in Turkey. Cells have been broken up as far as Germany and even in, say, Los Angeles in the United States. So, in fact, it is the emergence of the ISKP, which in fact, makes even groups like the Afghan Taliban and the TTP, in a sense, smell of roses, so to speak, because it is assessed by Western commentators that both the Afghan Taliban and the TTP have only got a local agenda as against the ISKP, which has global ambitions and which wants and can attack the West and the United States of America also. So, in a sense, the situation is almost, similar. It is in many ways similar to what existed between 1996 and 2001. Then, too, you had the Taliban in power in Afghanistan. Nobody knew quite how to deal with them. You had, of course, Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri there and the Al-Qaeda. Today, Al-Qaeda is at a low ebb, but the ISKP, which is an equally smart and equally technically savvy and equally lethal group, which is very much there. So addressing these challenges, I dare say, is equally important for America as managing great power competition with Russia and China. So, and in that scheme of things, the Americans can't entirely, discount Pakistan. In fact, they're not as dependent on Pakistan as they were when they were fighting Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, because the global lines of communication or the ground lines of communication passed through Pakistan. They had to use Pakistani air bases at that point of time to hit targets in Afghanistan. So they were more dependent on Pakistan at that point of time. That dependence has decreased now, and the Americans are at this point of time content with what they call an over-the-horizon capacity. But still, I think Pakistan has a role. The Americans would only be too aware that if groups like the ISKP have to be fought and contained and deterred and defeated in this region, then there will be a role for Pakistan and the Pakistani security establishment, the Pakistani intelligence agencies.
Mr. Kumar, how would you assess these recent claims by someone called Sarah Adams, who is said to be a CIA operative, that the Al Qaeda actually, and they're calling it Al Qaeda 2.0, also has camps in Afghanistan? How would you assess these reports?
Well, it is very difficult to sort of assess these reports without having access to any form of intelligence. One can only go by the information that is available in the public domain. So Al Qaeda has, after the decimation of its leadership, it has, I think, in a previous program, I had said that Al Qaeda is a much weakened organization. I still maintain that stand. So it is, Al Qaeda is clearly on the back foot now, but don't forget that the Americans watch groups with global ambitions very carefully. And in some ways, it is a matter of greater priority for them, groups that have the ability to strike the US and other Western countries. Whereas for us, the India-centric groups are more important. So they watch these groups very, very carefully. And if some elements, some remnants of Al-Qaeda are still present in Afghanistan, well, I wouldn't be surprised. You can never, terrorist groups may be down and out for some point of time, but it would be a capital mistake to discount them altogether, because then one can be in for nasty surprises. And these groups can recover, regroup, reorganize very quickly. So I would, not entirely discount what these American observers are saying. And that also, this is also connected to the previous point that I was discussing about the ISKP. The thing is that I think it is the assessment of the Americans and perhaps other Western analysts and observers as well, that, if the Afghan Taliban is not there, if they were toppled in any manner, then Afghanistan would become a completely ungoverned space where groups like the ISKP, the TTP, its various factions and offshoots, Al-Qaeda, AQIS, it's an absolute alphabet soup of terrorist groups. They can all very easily, coalesce in that region and form bases there from which they can strike out against various parts of the world. That really is the basic security concern that many countries face.
Mr. Kumar, it's almost been 3 years since the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, and I guess that would be a long enough period to assess their approach towards terrorist groups and terrorism in general. And how would you see it? Because this is quite critical to what happens in Pakistan in the border areas. What is your sense that do you think the Taliban have changed or they retain their high tolerance levels for groups like the ISKP and others? And since they're allowing them to operate from their soil?
So I think here again, there is a question of intent and capability. In fact, as some Pakistani commentators and analysts have pointed out, do the Afghan Taliban, do they really are they really sincere when they say that they will not allow Afghan territory to be used as a sanctuary by terrorist groups? Or are they just putting on an act? Now, I personally feel that whether it is the Afghan Taliban or any other group, I'm tempted to say that a leopard doesn't change its spots. So I think the Taliban are more or less what they were when they first ruled Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. Of course, there is a critical difference. You mentioned the ISKP. the Afghan Taliban and the ISKP are, of course, at daggers drawn, which is the utility of the Taliban to the international community at this point of time. But there are other groups with which the Taliban share ideological similarities. Al Qaeda is one. So it is a very, very, as I go back to what I said at the beginning, it is a murky business. But even if you discount the intent part, there is also the issue of capabilities. Does the Afghan state, as it is now, does it have the instrumentalities and the capabilities to, put terrorist groups out of action in every corner of the country? Does the writ of the state really run in Afghanistan throughout the country? The state apparatus is still very, very weak. So the capabilities are also weak. And therefore, I think even if the Taliban wanted to, I think it's not very easy for them to get rid of the groups that they really don't like from the country, as the ISKP has shown. Despite the antipathy of the Afghan Taliban, the ISKP has still managed to secure and maintain a foothold in that country.
Mr. Kumar, finally, looking at the link between, I mean, there are obviously stresses and strains in the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Airstrikes have taken place. They have exchanged fire. They've traded barbs, at each other. But so, what is your sense? I mean, overall, do you see the Pakistani establishment showing any signs of change, or is it just, these operations are just moments to buy time and tell the rest of the world that, no, actually, we are serious about dealing with terrorist groups?
Well, I think, in a sense, you have hit the nail on the head. And as I said at the beginning, I mean, as we speak, there have been sort of a series of terrorist incidents along Pakistan's western borders. But equally, let us also not forget, and this is more important to us as we speak. I mean, it's just a couple of days after a major terrorist incident that we've had in the Jammu region, and this follows, or this too is part of a series of terrorist strikes that we have seen in the Jammu region over the past few months. And that then brings us to that fundamental question which you touched upon, the fundamental issue. Is there really a change of heart in Pakistan, particularly as far as the Pakistani army, which is more entrenched in power now than possibly at any other time in Pakistan's history? Is there a real change of heart? Is there a real change in the strategic calculus of the Pakistani security establishment? And clearly now we are seeing a dichotomy. Despite the battering and the hammering that Pakistan is getting along its western borders at the hands of its, erstwhile clients who've now turned against them, one would expect that, Pakistan's ardor for the jihadi groups would have been permanently sort of doused. But if you look at what is happening along the eastern border on our side, that doesn't seem to be happening. Clearly, some of the India-centric groups, which had seemingly been in recessed mode, particularly after the February 2021 ceasefire came into effect, they seem to be sort of getting unsheathed or unleashed again. And this is something that we have to think very carefully about.
So, Mr. Kumar, your sense, from whatever I understand, is that there's a big question mark over the Pakistani establishment's seriousness or commitment on dealing with terrorism. And it looks as if they continue to harbor the notion of good terrorists and bad terrorists. On that note, we'll have to end this episode of the In Focus podcast. Thank you very much for talking to us again.
My pleasure.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.